And that's the icosahedron we see around the outside, 1.2% of the mass. It's magnetic. Nobody's been able to explain why refrigerator magnets don't fall off the refrigerator. What the heck is a permanent magnet? Why does it just keep generating energy? All you have to do is move a wire over the magnet and it induces electrical current in the wire. That's called Lenz's law. Pretty amazing. So this could explain where magnetic energy is coming from. It's the resonance coming off of the iron molecule. The iron atom, the nucleus, is resonating, creating a magnetic field. Then we go down. We got the cube, we got the octahedron, we got the icosahedron, which is iron. Then we go down, we got the dodeck. That's the last one, and that's palladium. Now, why is palladium so interesting? Here's your dodeck again in the middle. Palladium is the magic material that they drop into heavy hydrogen, this hydrogen water, and the palladium generates heat. For some reason, it starts vibrating, and it creates all this heat that it shouldn't create. And that forms what they call cold fusion. So the whole secret to cold fusion is the palladium. Nobody knows why it works. But with Dr. Robert Moon's discoveries from 1987, before they discovered cold fusion, we now have the scientific rationale for why it works, which is that guy, that dodeck, is resonating. The hydrogen is banging off of it, it's creating all this energy. So this explains all these really cool things. Now, is there any real practical proof that Dr. Robert Moon was right? Yes. I got all excited because IBM went down with this very advanced technology and they were able to scan out a single molecule. They were able to see what it looks like at the molecular level. And guess what it looks like? Unfrickin' believable. You can actually see the Merkaba. You can actually see the energy flow. You can see the hexagonal geometric containment pattern. It fits together so beautifully. So what we're dealing with here is a vibration that's actually making matter fit together a certain way. Now, we also have microclusters. This is another one of these weird things that we didn't understand how it worked until this quantum science comes along. This is 459 gold atoms on the left and 561 gold atoms on the right. What they were doing in these microcluster studies is they shoot atoms out of a gun, one at a time. The atoms then bundle together in certain patterns. But they always make certain magical shapes, which are geometric. They preferentially do this. They prefer to form geometry. Now, science has no explanation for this. But this is a map now of the actual different patterns that the geometry takes when you have a cluster of about 460 gold atoms hanging out. So it doesn't stay the same shape. It's constantly kind of moving because, remember, it's in a sea of energy. And there's waves in the ocean. There's waves in the sea. So as those waves move through, you notice that the shape is changing, but that the underlying geometry is always there. And that's actual real scanning electron microscope photographs. So this is all fine and good for dead matter. As in our conventional scientific view, we say, oh, the matter is dead. It's not really alive. Right? So water would be following this. But what about living material? What about DNA? Well, DNA also has geometry in how those molecules fit together remarkably well. First of all, you get these hexagon-shaped chains and you get these pentagon-shaped chains. Nobody really understands why that's happening. Sacred geometry, the vibration of the original photon, the light that created the universe, the same mathematical patterns are in your DNA. She's writing everything down as I go. She's all excited about it. The rest of us are like, wow, I don't know about the heat in here. We're just trying to figure this thing out. Okay, so this guy, Dr. Mark White, looked at the DNA and figured out how the structure actually fits together. And I saw this diagram, I didn't really get it. I saw this diagram, I didn't really get it. But what you're supposed to be seeing is the dodecahedron, which is there on the left. And his discovery was that the double helix actually wraps around the geometry, meaning that the geometry ultimately is attracting those molecules that make DNA. The geometry is all there is. Well, that didn't do me any good until I saw this. This is a diagram that shows you a stack of dodecahedrons like a totem pole, and then you take the actual double helix of the DNA. It's like you got those old-fashioned pipe cleaners that you used to make little toys out of, right? Well, I'm from the 70s. I mean, it was cool back then. Trust me, if you're like freaking texting on your phone, millennial, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Anyway, you wrap the pipe cleaners around your little totem pole of dodecs, and the exact phase angle of the double helix is where the geometry tells those molecules to go. So the only thing that's really here is this vibration, this stack of dodecahedrons vibration, which are part of a larger structure. So the larger structure is also geometric, but these are the fractals. These are the tinier fractals. And remember, if you go inside here and you look at the deeper layers of vibration, all the other shapes will fit in there. The shapes of the other atoms and molecules. Remember, they're all interconnected, right? So this is like a geometric gravitational vortex. It's pulling gravitational energies pulling in. Well, what did I just say at the beginning of the talk happens to light when it's around DNA? It gets gravitationally sucked in. Is this starting to make sense to you now? Are you starting to get this thing? It's the same gravity. Honestly. That gives me a water break. I'm just going to take a water break here. It's the same gravitational force, a geometric gravitational force that pushes those atoms together when they're shot out one at a time and making those microclusters that I just showed you. It's the same gravitational force that's actually cohering matter into these protons in the nucleus that are geometric, like the oxygen, which is the cube, the silicon, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same stuff, the same forces that are holding galaxies together into supergalaxies and are taking galactic arms and making them geometric. Same force, this gravitational attraction in a geometric pattern, pulls all the atoms together and arranges them into DNA. So this is how DNA is formed out of non-living material. This is why the universe will make life wherever water is found. So then we advance forward to a very, very significant discovery, which is that watery planets are all over the frickin' universe. And this is a major, major part of my new book. The universe is teeming with Earth-like planets. We discovered this in 2013. This is Drake, and the Drake equation is what all the people hired by the television shows that are supposed to debunk UFOs. He made this calculation, which you see on this chalkboard behind him, in which he said, well, there's only 2.25 civilizations in the galaxy. Well, what the heck is a 0.25 civilization? But everybody thought, oh, man, he did it. He scientifically proved there's no life in the universe. Well, NASA's changed its tune, and I first found out about it in this article, The Fermi Paradox, quoting from this scientific paper, which actually tells us now the full implications of it are that there could be as many as 40 billion Earth-like planets just in our galaxy. 40 billion. If we took every person on Earth and gave them a ship that could go to anywhere in the galaxy and said, go look for planets that we could live on, dude. And if you have 7 billion people on Earth, and they're all adults now, you'd need each person would have to go to 6 different Earth-like planets to even see them all. It's just, what do you do with that kind of stuff? So when we see this awesome percentage of Earth-like planets here, I just was pointing your attention now to the bottom. it says they surveyed 42,000 sun-like stars for the dimmings that occur when a planet crosses in front. We found 603 planets, 10 of which are Earth-size and orbit in the habitable zone. That means that there's a total of 22% of sun-like stars orbiting that have Earth-sized planets around them. The nearest planet may be only 12 light years away. Whew. So now think about all the laws that I've been telling you, and think about how, whoops, I wanted to go back to that for a minute. Think about all the science that I've showed you and how these geometric laws are not intrinsic to the Earth. They're intrinsic to the universe. There's a universal geometry that made everything, the original photon. If those guys are right, and I absolutely believe they are, then that's all there is. That means that you are the photon. This validates the ancient esoteric teachings that tell us that the universe is an alive, conscious being of light. That light was the original creation. In the beginning there was light, right? Or in the beginning there was the sound, the aum, and everything was made from that vibration. What we find out from all these different teachings that now appear to be given to us by extraterrestrials with advanced technology is that the light is what we are. And you have to evolve back into that. So ascension is where you meditate on that awareness. You meditate on that primordial awareness that you ultimately are, and that meditation transitions you back into your native form. So there's some other really cool stuff that I wanted to show you that now takes all this science and applies it directly to ascension and evolution. So we can prove that mass evolution is already happening, that we are already changing, we are already having these genetic rewrites that are implied by the science I said before. Konchazin is one of the scientists who I was really into, and you've heard me talk about him if you've read my books, but I got some pictures from the Russians. I've been asking for this for years, and they finally gave them to me, some real pictures of his research. This is all we had going on at first. This diagram was kind of hard to understand, but the idea was that he built some kind of a large room that was in the shape of a dodecahedron, right? Well, that's interesting. Dodecahedron, there it is. And then each corner, each face of the dodecahedron has a funnel coming out of it, which is those triangles that are measured by number 2. The funnels then have copper pipes that route over into another room, which is number 5. And then in this astonishingly precise scientific diagram, number 4 is a duck. Well, not so precise. Now what he's doing is number 3 is a microwave generator. It's not enough to kill the duck, but it's enough to jazz up his DNA. The duck's DNA is getting jazzed up. It's creating these photons that are released by the microwaves. The photons are then some of them are getting routed through the pipes into room number 5, in which you now have a pregnant chicken with eggs in her womb. Now, thank God I finally was able to get us this. You're only the second audience ever to have seen this. This is the actual illustration, an actual photograph of the scientist Konchazin with this gigantic geodesic shape. It's not quite a dodecahedron as I'm now seeing because there's hexagons on those side faces, but it's close. And then inside there, he puts the duck in the microwave generator, and he zaps the duck, redirects the beam over into this little container over here, and he has these eggs, and he's taken the chicken out of there for a while, but the chicken is now normally going to be sitting on the eggs so they don't die, or perhaps he's just incubating them, but I think the chicken, I don't know if the chicken's in there or not, actually. It looks like the chicken is not, so maybe he just keeps them warm. So the eggs get a genetic rewrite from this DNA zapping. So what happens is their features change. So here's what a duck looks like. A duck has an elongated beak and webbing between its toes. Here's what chickens look like. The chicken has a shorter beak and is naked toes. Now this just so happens to be an image I pulled up on Google of ducks and chickens. This is just a chicken that adopted ducks, okay? That's not what came out of the eggs. What we got was this, so-called duck hens. Now, for some reason, this guy chopped off legs from other duck hens, and stuck it above the other ones. I couldn't figure out for the longest time, why the hell are there two severed legs just hanging out above the other chicken? But then, so what he was trying to show was that chickens are not supposed to have webbing between their feet, but these duck hens actually do. And you can see it right there. So here's the findings that were discovered. He took a total of 500 different eggs. He could only do a little pile of them at each time. 500 different eggs were zapped. Of those 500 eggs, 480 of them actually hatched. That's pretty good. 80% of what came out had a flat duck-shaped head, not like a chicken. 90% had a shift in where the eye was located on the face, more to where a duck would be, and 25% had webbing appear between the toes. So notice on the duck's head that the eye is high and far back on the skull, and that there's an elongated beak and webbing. And the chicken's eye is kind of in the middle of the skull, and it has a short beak and no webbing. So this is a total transformation into these little guys. And then now, more recently, I found this picture of which he pickled one of the ducks. Now, here's the really cool thing. I got a message, and I don't know what to do with this yet. I'm just going to be honest with you. I got a message from a Russian colleague. I'm not going to say his name, just for security. But he writes me a lot of stuff. And I'm in the process of buying some technology from these guys. In fact, I already paid for it. Now I got to pay for shipping, and I haven't paid for the shipping yet. So I'm going to be doing that. Hopefully, I got to just write the guy back. I've just been really, really busy. Anyway, he wrote me an email yesterday and said that Conchazen is prepared to cook us up some more duck hens in his little box, and we can then DNA test their DNA. And would we sponsor that research in some way or get that research done? And I'm just saying it out to you now, so if anybody has an idea of how we could get DNA testing done on this duck DNA, well, she doesn't like animal experimentation. The point is, this stuff has given us an underlying scientific principle. I don't think the research needs to be done anymore. I don't want to do more animal testing either. We already know. I mean, look, you can see right here what was done. On a much more benevolent level, doesn't mess with animals, he took corn and wheat and mixed it together. And what do you think that's going to look like? Nobody's ever seen this. You're only the second group to ever see this. You see the kind of the shape of the ear of corn, but then it's got the little tassels of wheat coming off of it. It's a morph between the two forms. And here he is. You can see now that they have the kind of stalks that corn would have, but then they also have wheat-like seed heads on top of them. So his other discovery was that he could make rooms in the shape of eggs out of metal, and that people staying inside them, their health would dramatically increase. And this mirrors many other studies, torsion field type studies. So there he is inside the egg-shaped room, and those plants all grow much better. And, considering what this guy is doing with animals and stuff, maybe he might have messed around with that dog a little bit. No, I'm just joking. But, buddy, stay away from the turkey, all right? We don't want no more. Just let him go. And there he is with his little pickled duck hen in the jar. So if you've ever wondered what the heck is going on with a duck-billed platypus, here's my theory. A few ducks were hanging out, and there were some moles nearby. Maybe some alcohol was involved. Who the heck knows? Or maybe they just got struck by lightning, but somehow their DNA fused together. This thing doesn't make any sense. It's not a bird, but it's got a bird beak. It's a frickin' freak. This thing doesn't make any sense at all. And it's got these weird poisonous spines on its feet. It's just very bizarre. That's all proof of this. Now, Dr. Garyaev, the same scientist who I was talking to you about before, showed that you could actually transform one species completely into another with no genetic freaks whatsoever. And this is the laser that I actually have already bought. I paid $1,500 for one of these lasers that you see right here. I haven't got it mailed to me yet. But I'm going to be able to do any of these type of tests if I wanted to, and there's other things you can do with it. Like, for example, they took the DNA from the great-granddaughter of a grandmother who's lost all of her teeth. They energized that DNA with one of these lasers, and it's got a certain kind of special vibrational signature that goes on it. And when you energize that DNA with the laser, for some reason, it stimulates the people backwards in the family tree. So if you have children, you can energize their DNA, and Grandma actually regrew 4 molars in the back of her mouth. Isn't that crazy? Now, they didn't get the whole mouth, and unfortunately, Garyaev, who you see right here, was fired from his job at a mainstream Russian hospital after he did that research. Because they said, that's impossible, you're crazy. So I actually was given an offer to buy one of these at half price. They're normally $3,000. I bought it for $1,500. And, you know, I don't have any children, but there's certainly ways that we could try to find people who do. And if they're missing some teeth, you know, we'll just see what happens. We'll have some fun with this thing. I don't know what else to do with it yet. I'm going to figure it out. But apparently it does lots of different healing stuff. If you have some good genetic DNA and you energize it with the laser, you can reactivate that DNA vibrationally. It's like you're rewinding the vibrational clock, and it has this very interesting healing effect. Another one of the things that he did is to take eggs that were naturally laid by a frog and then zap that laser that I just purchased through eggs laid by a salamander. The beaming into the frog eggs created a complete metamorphosis. The frog eggs that came out of a frog's body grew into salamanders and showed no evidence whatsoever of having come out of frogs. Now, yes, it's a creepy thing to be zapping lasers and doing this stuff, but the important point that I hope you don't miss is that this is exactly what is happening to us. This is part of the genetic aspect of ascension. This is the ascension process. So one of the studies that I found that shows us this was published in Mail Online, Daily Mail. This is May 31st, 2012. Nobody understands why this is happening, but in the last 150 years, the average skull of an American, studied from the mid-1800s up until 1980s, the average skull has had an increase in brain size and volume by a whole tennis ball. That's a total of 1,500 skulls that were surveyed. The faces are becoming longer and narrower. It's quite incredible. Quite incredible. This was another study that jerked my chain because it was published in June 2012. Source field had already come out by this point, and I argued that DNA was a universal, just like I've argued to you here. They didn't ever mention my book. They just talked about this without ever giving credit to the source of where it came from. That's very common. These things happen all the time. But the point is, they're putting out the idea that DNA is some sort of universal wave, which I've just now proven to you in this talk. So now we have this anthropologist from University of Wisconsin, Dr. John Hawkes, who's DNA testing mummies and looking at their evolutionary rate, which he calls positive selection. And in these studies, he found that human evolution has sped up 100 times faster in the last 5,000 years. So whatever we are doing in our part of the galaxy, it appears that we're moving into some new energy that's actually jacking up our DNA and changing it into something else, just like these genetic tests prove that can be done. The last 40,000 years have been a time of supercharged evolutionary change. And his ultimate discovery was that if you DNA test Neanderthal DNA and compare it to somebody from 5,000 years ago, the DNA of the Neanderthal is closer to that DNA from 3000 BC than it is to us. to put it in a simple language, our DNA has evolved by 7%. It's changed by 7% in the last 5,000 years. That's a gigantic amount of change. Totally unprecedented. So here is one study, one newspaper publication that shows this evolution taking place from the Daily Galaxy. Here's another one from the BBC. Human evolution is speeding up. And we have the Flynn effect that's showing that our IQ is going up. So there's an average increase of 3 IQ points per decade for over 100 years. Over 20 different countries, it's all doing the same thing. This is unbelievable. The increase is most striking for the tests that measure our ability to recognize abstract, nonverbal patterns. That means it's not about literacy. It's not about reading magazines and newspapers. It's about symbolic, creative, intuition thinking. How do you explain all this stuff? The skull is getting larger. The DNA is changed by 7%. The IQ is going up. It shows that we are evolving. And that genetic model, that idea that you can zap the salamander energy into frog eggs and transform them into salamanders, actually shows up in the fossil record as well. Let's look at this. This is an actual diagram built by 2 scientists, Dr. James Raup and Dr. David Sepkoski. This is from the most exhaustive collection of fossil data ever found and put together. 3,300 different genres of life in the oceans, going all the way back, as you can see on the bottom right, 250 million years ago. Now, what are we actually looking at here? The height of the graph is how many new species appear on Earth that we've never seen before. The height of the graph is new species. What we're seeing is that there are regular spikes in which sudden bursts of evolution happen across the entire planet. A massive number of species completely evolve into something new, and it's happening in a regular cycle that they estimated to be somewhere between 25 to 26 million years. Now, more recently, we have Robert Rode from UC Berkeley, who took the whole graph even further back to 542 million years ago and found a bigger cycle, a cycle of 62 million years. And you can see that it kind of breaks down once you get to this point, which was the 250 million year mark, where the other one started. It still works a little bit, but there's a new cycle that's starting to kick in there. So what's going on here? Well, what I did is I actually built this diagram where I combined the two together, showing that first it's on one cycle, and then it upshifts to another one. Well, this was one of my greatest scientific achievements. One of the things that just blew me away. As I was looking at this diagram, I'm meditating on this, I'm thinking, okay, let's look at the units of time. 62 million years, okay? There's 4 of them. What's 4 times 62? 248. What is the estimated orbit of our galaxy in millions of years? 250 million years. Only 2 million years off from this. Then we got the 26, which is really closer to 25, and there's 10 of them. And lo and behold, this is what I realized. So if you can't understand all the nuts and bolts and the numbers, check this out. Remember that I showed you this is the big payoff, folks. If you're falling asleep from heat stroke, because it's fucking hot in here. Okay? I'm up there on the stage. You got to remember, I'm like about to freaking pass out. I think I'm doing really well under the circumstances. Thank you. And remember, I'm wearing a dress shirt. I'm not even wearing my normal linen. Oh, take it off. Yeah, that's great. That ain't going to happen. Remember I said before, this is so exciting to me, that there's geometric energy that's bending galactic arms in straight lines. And what I'm now proposing to you is that that geometry is sitting there in one place, and as the galaxy spins, it's actually moving through the geometry as the geometry sits still. So just imagine the geometry is sitting there, it doesn't move, and then as the stars go through it, they are being bent by the geometry. So they're going to make a turn that's like a 60-degree turn. They're going to go this way, and then and they go off that way because the gravitational current directs them that way. What happens when they hit one of the nodes, one of the corners of the geometry? What happens to the life on the planets of the stars in those galaxies, based on or the stars in that galaxy? Well, that's the diagram that we were just looking at. These are the corners of the geometry, folks. So as we hit those geometric points, they are information dense. They have information that rewrites all the DNA of all the species on Earth, which we already now know is happening because our DNA has changed by 7% in the last 5,000 years. And we're also seeing that, in fact, there is a volume of a tennis ball size that our heads have expanded by. Well, what about these people with the elongated skulls? If you were at the panel last night, Brian Forster was there, remember that? And we're talking about these people with these freaking huge skulls, like twice as big as ours in the back. Those are people that were more evolved than we are. Okay, so as we move through this geometry, it's coming up here again, we're hitting those points. Now, here's how it works. The first 4 cycles are the 4 corners of the octahedron. So now imagine that we're moving along, the star hits that corner, the galaxy rotates in 248 million years, which means it's one circle for 248. So 62 million years between this point and this point, just by dividing 248 by 4. That's how long it takes to go from point A to point B. So your star is drifting along. It hits this corner, and that's where the fractal is. That's where all the geometry is nested together. That geometry is the code that rewrites your DNA. Then these bubbles are also expanding away from the center. That's the next important thing. Galaxies are evolving. These are like the chakras of the galaxy, and they expand. The galaxy is going through a life cycle. Eventually it widens out and becomes a ring galaxy, and it pushes all the stars out to the edge. And then at that point, it actually implodes on itself, and that's when the galaxy is complete and everyone inside the galaxy has ascended. That's how this actually seems to be working. So that's a lot to take in, huh? It's like, see, this shit, it's like easy for me. Y'all are like, say what? I'll try it again. Let's say that one more time. So imagine now that these geometries are inside bubbles, okay? So the octahedron is one, and then the icosahedron is in another bubble. What's that? Oh, put some cold water. Thanks, bro. That way the speaker doesn't pass out. But it's interesting, you know, the psychedelic experience of having so much heat. It's like a sweat lodge. The Wilcock sweat lodge. Okay. So bubbles expanding. So that octahedron is getting larger and larger and larger. But the stars don't move. The stars are just going around in circles. Ultimately, they're going to get pushed away once it all expands, but that takes a long time. This is just how the remote viewing and the scientific deductions that I've come up with explain this. And I actually made this diagram in order to illustrate it because no such diagram existed. So these bubbles are expanding away from the center, so we are moving through, we first move through the octahedron. We go through one cycle of the galaxy, we hit all 4 corners. Oh, why, thank you.
Passing on the torch.
Okay, this is going to saturate me completely, but hey, it's awesome. Thank you. All right, so the bubbles here are expanding, and then look at the icosahedron, and remember that there are 12 corners on the icosahedron. So we have the top and bottom, 1 and 2, and then we have a total of 1 pentagon on the top and 1 pentagon on the bottom, which you can actually see. So here's the 1 pentagon on the top, and here's the 1 pentagon on the bottom, right? So there's 5 up here and 5 down here. Now these form currents that exert force in a north-south direction because these are controlled by magnetic fields. The magnetic fields have field lines similar to what you see if you put iron filings on a piece of paper and you hold a magnet underneath it. Those are called lines of force or field lines. Awesome. Now I got cold water in there. I'm upping my game here, thanks to you all's help. Awesome. And I let my southern accent come out just there. You notice that? That's when you know it's really freaking hot. I grew up in New York, and I only lived in the South for 8 years, but every now and then it just pokes out. Okay, so magnetic lines of force, as we go along through the ecliptic plane, we're crossing over these ley lines, these magnetic ley lines, and they carry the information vibration, the code, from those points. So this is why, once again, we didn't want that yet. This is why, once again, let's go back to the one that doesn't have the starburst in it. We see here these lines where it says 26 million year, that should actually be 25. Those lines represent the points of the geometry. Each of those corners of that icosahedron creates a magnetic field line. It's a wall that we hit as the galaxy is rotating. The 62 million year cycle is a lot easier to see because you got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines that we hit before that shape expands away and is no longer the main one influencing it. But the point is, those lines, each line represents one of those geometric node points, and it has conscious, living, divine information in it. Divine information that creates ascension. Now think about, again, the sheer number of habitable watery Earths that would be in a given galaxy. We now know it's 40 billion, right? Do you think that this system only is working on Earth? No. Every single star in that galaxy is moving through that geometry, causing the arms to bend in straight lines, as I showed you in those pictures. And when you hit the corner, when you then make a 60-degree or 90-degree turn like you do here, you're going through this information-dense area that reprograms your DNA. So the universe itself is designed to create an inevitable ascension mechanism. You have to keep moving through if you're going to stay on that planet, and if you don't stay on the planet and you haven't gotten ready to ascend yet, you have to go somewhere else. So this now is the whole scientific background for what the real goal of the talk was, is to talk about the preparation for ascension. So I want to talk to you about this concept of the DNA evolving, the consciousness evolving. Our minds are becoming more evolved, our enlightenment is increasing, and there's yet all this stress on the earth at this time. Now we're looking at a new model of the cosmos in which geometry is fractalizing, kind of like this really cool illustration I found online. Downloaded that off of pond5.com. That's really a nice it's not exactly precise. It's based on I now know it's based on an Adobe After Effects plugin called Plexus. And I could probably reconstruct this if I spent enough time, but I haven't done it yet. I know how they did it. But anyway, the point is, this is a really cool kind of dancing geometry version. It's like a visual mandala that we can meditate on, giving us an idea of how the universe is creating itself out of this geometry. And think about the idea that this geometry is all fractals of the original photon, and that is ultimately what is going on inside your cells. Your cells, your DNA, is a geometric pattern that absorbs photons. And there's new photons coming in. That's what all these esoteric teachings are telling us, that there's new photons that have new codes in them that change our DNA. Well, I just proved to you that that really works, because I showed you how it works on the galactic level, that we move through this geometry and we hit new node points. Well, Walter Cruttenden on my panel with the binary star, how many people saw the binary star panel? Raise your hand. Okay, not as many. We now know that our solar system is orbiting another star called the Black Sun. It seems to be a brown dwarf, And as we move through that star, we're moving through geometry, just like what I showed you on the galactic level. So that geometry actually is causing the same thing to happen. And when we reach the end of the cycle, we hit this wall of energy that activates DNA. Except now it's happening from a star and not on a galactic level. So this ascension process does involve some very interesting things, because not everybody gets what they're supposed to learn. This is not universal ascension. The ancient teachings, including the Tibetans, think about how many people actually ascended in the rainbow body practices. There's 160,000 documented who did it. Now that's a lot, but it's a very small percentage compared to the total number of people on Earth. So you don't get a full graduation. You don't get everybody ascending. You have to prepare for ascension. So as I said here, one of the main things I want to do in this talk, first of all, is to break down the mental conditioning and show you what I believe now is the actual fractal holographic model of the cosmos, in which this original photon creates geometry that expands out into the whole universe, and the geometry is alive and intelligent. And as you move through new areas of it, it changes your DNA structure, rewrites the code by an intelligent blueprint. Well, one of the things that happens is we have this law of free will, and all these ancient teachings say that free will is preserved, that there's karma, okay? That means that there are people on Earth, these global elites, who are killing off billions of people, who are weaponizing our food supply, who are controlling the media, controlling the financial system, dropping nuclear bombs, doing horrible things. And if you are a person who wants to see those people die and who actually causes that to happen, how does the universe balance your karma? How do you pay off that karma? Apparently, these cycles, like the one we're now going through, end in catastrophe, but only if you're on that timeline. This becomes a really essential point, okay? I want you to, all the stuff that I've said is to break down the conditioning, to show you the idea that science is way freaking off. And that when you fix the science, we now have the proof, or at least a compelling suggestion, that the very basic nature of matter and energy itself could suddenly change. Life on Earth, I believe, is not going to stay the same. Everybody says, David, when's it going to happen? What did the insiders tell you? Well, first of all, I thought it was 2012 because all the science, the math looked good. With the Mayan calendar end date, nothing happened. But Corey Goode comes along, and with his people in the space program, they told him that this event was going to take place between 2018 and 2023. Now, what am I talking about event? It appears that when our sun hits that geometry, when it hits that geometric corner, that because there's so much more energy in the node is really concentrated, it's got a high vibration, that the sun gives off this big blast of light and energy. And many, many ancient cultures teach this, and I don't have enough time in today's talk. Now that works. Yeah, we're getting some, I'm feeling a nice cross breeze now. It's finally cooling off outside. That's awesome. So, this new energy that's coming in, see, I'm getting telepathically influenced by this new energy of air. Wow. See, this is like it's channeling, right? So there's all different stuff coming in at once, including that I respond to my own environment as I'm talking. So, but it all fits. This breeze of new energy coming in from the sun goes whoosh, gives off this big flash. The Hindus called it the Samavartika fire at the end of an age, and they said it was rainbow-colored light that the sun gives off, not just white light. Rainbow-colored light, a big flash, just like I showed you. That photon at the beginning of the universe goes psh, and the dust that was left behind at the far reaches of the galaxy still has the original geometric pattern of the octahedron in it. So the sun does this, and apparently what happens is that those who need to experience the catastrophe do. Everyone else, is either moved to another planet where everything stays the same and they're still in the third dimension, or if they've actually ascended, they get to stay with the Earth as it moves to another frequency, a new level of energy in which matter is at a different level that is not affected by this change. So, this is now a quote from the Law of One material, and I'm going to bring you through some of this stuff because this is some things that I've very rarely used in front of audiences. I didn't really want to talk about the idea of the Earth changes before. Actually, and part of it was because of how the Law of One answered the original question in the first session, question 9. The changes are very, very trivial. Then they go on to say, we do not concern ourselves with the conditions which bring about harvest. And harvest is their term for this energetic change. Now, what happens in harvest? You pull out the good crops, and then you till the soil. The soil is broken up, and it's overturned. So they're actually saying that the earth is overturned, that the soil on the surface of the earth is overturned. And in my new book, Ascension Mysteries, I finally come out with all this stuff. And I quote from the Bible, where there's a quote from Jesus where he says, "Not one stone that is standing here today will remain standing when this happens." And he talks about this flash, the light shining from the east unto the west. He said that if you are out on top of a roof, that you're not even going to have enough time to go down inside the house. Just stay on the roof when this thing starts to happen because you're not going to have enough time. In the Zoroastrian tradition, they call it frashokareti. And it is an energetic change that involves a release of energy from the sun. And they say that the wicked are burned by the energy, but that the just are transformed into something new, and that's extremely blissful and amazing. Now, here's another really weird thing. Again, I didn't want to focus on earth changes before, but it's important to mention this. Session 10, question 15, he's asking about the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. The answer is the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria were not one, but two. And Lemuria they call Mu. Let us first look at Mu. They were beings of a somewhat primitive nature, but those who had very advanced spiritual distortions. The civilization was part of this cycle experienced at approximately 53,000 of your years ago. This is where the sinking started. Actually, that's where the origins of the sinking started, as they say in another place. Lemuria was a helpful and harmless place washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of your sphere's tectonic plates through no action of their own. Now, if you understand, all you guys have told me that you've read most of you, almost all of you, said you read my books, you watched my show, at least to some degree. So you know how much I've validated this Law of One stuff. Hundreds of scientific data points. In fact, so much of the science that I gave you in this talk is right out of the Law of One. I just had to find the data to match it in the real world. So now, if I've validated the Law of One this much, why would they be wrong about this? This idea that there was a geological change. So they washed beneath the ocean, and then those who survived reached many places you call Russia, North America, and South America. The Indians, of whom you have come to feel some sympathy in your social complex, this is before the term Native Americans came up, are the descendants of these entities. Very interesting. Just to quickly refresh my mind, how many years ago did Lemuria suffer its catastrophe? 50,000 years ago. The origins being approximately 53,000 of your years ago. So this again is describing how this whole thing came into being. So the Law of One makes it really difficult to actually figure out what the heck is going on. The damage being completed in the last small cycle of the first master cycle, and elsewhere they explain what those cycles are. Those who escaped the destruction of Lemuria by natural catastrophe and were of Lemurian background continued their learned teachings. And that's interesting. They always talk about how as you're learning, you're teaching, and as you're teaching, you're learning. And I learn every time I do this stuff. I keep tightening up my game, getting better at it. At locations ranging from your South America onward through the Americas as you know them. and continuing over what was at that time a land bridge that no longer exists, which most of us already know that. Did the ending of this first major cycle have something to do with Lemuria being destroyed, or did it just happen to occur? And this is probably the most important clue that the Law of One ever gave us, the answer. Check this out. It says, there is a confluence of energies at the ending of a major cycle. It's where you get into that geometry. It's where all those geometric frequencies cause the sun to go whoosh, which a lot of ancient teachings describe, and it's from these same beings that gave it to us. This encouraged what was already an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces of your planetary sphere. Whoa! What did they say in session 1.9? The changes are very, very trivial. We do not concern ourselves. Dude, an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surface of the sphere? What happens if the surface of the sphere moves that much? And they're calling it harvest, which is what do you do in harvest? You break up the land and you turn it upside down. But we now know, and this is actually highly classified, but not only are there supervolcanoes on the surface of the earth, there's even bigger and nastier ones all along the oceanic fault lines. And the only thing that's stopping them from going off is the pressure of the water. When they go off, they blast rocks up into the air, and the rocks cover everything in what could ultimately, in some cases, be hundreds of feet of rock. So I had insiders tell me that you can dig down inside the earth and go, and the older they get, the farther down they go. You go down underground, and you find civilizations that used to be on the surface, but they've gotten buried by these supervolcano eruptions that create all these rocks that shoot up into the air and fall back down and pile up on us. And I've had very, very disturbing dreams where I get to see it from the perspective of the people whose karma invited that disaster, which is not any of us. Okay, just to be clear, you're not going to have to physically go through this. But some people who have invited it and authorized it will. And because I've known this all this time and we're getting this close to it, I feel like I got to talk to you about this. Wouldn't you rather know this stuff than me just lie to you and not tell you what I know? Right? Okay, thank you. I got, if it's going to happen in 2017, which was what my first major insider told me, he said, you've been talking 2012. He said this in 2009. What you think is 2012 is actually 2017. You're right, you're just off by 5 years. Then I had another guy independently, Corey Good, show up, had no idea what this other guy said, and he said 2018. They're only off by 1 year. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. And then other insiders have also said the period of 2018 to 2023. So there's a 5-year window. But Corey's data also was that the 5-year window is a transitional period that begins at 2017. And there may also be a series of flashes from the sun, not just one. And those flashes actually activate and enhance our DNA. An inevitable adjustment. Now, in session 2, they get into this weird thing. This is another, you got to really dig for this stuff. It's not easy to find. They're talking about how they need to have a Bible, an incense stick, and a chalice of water at Carla's head while she's doing the channeling. The incense stick has to be aligned with north, or so they say. But then they say the proper alignment is the head, her head, as she lies there, pointing 20 degrees north by northeast, not to magnetic north. Well, what the heck is that going on? This is the direction from which the newer or new age distortions of love light, which are less distorted, are emanating from. And this instrument will find comfort therein. What the heck is that saying? That's saying, they're telling you in their kind of funny little way, you're going to have a pole shift, 20-degree pole shift. And they say it again much more directly. Look at this. Previously, you stated that one of the base sides should be aligned with magnetic north. Which is better, to align it with magnetic north or 20 degrees east of magnetic north? They say this is at your discretion. The proper alignment for you of this sphere at this time is magnetic north, but then they go on. Check this out. Right now it's magnetic north, but you asked about a structure that's been used by entities whose energy vortices are more consonant with true color green. Now they talk about how when we go through this process that the green ray, this new energy wave that's green ray photons, the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, love, the planet, remember Gordon Asher Davidson was saying we're going to be engulfed in love? Well, that's what's going to happen. It's the green ray photons. Nothing that is unloving will be allowed to survive on Earth anymore. Let's have it. I can't wait. So the true color green north is 20 degrees east of north, because that's the alignment the Earth is going to be in once we go through this. A 20-degree pole shift is bad for beagles and begonias, right? Unless they warp out, which is what happens. They have these gigantic ships, these motherships, that make sure that everything is preserved. There are advantages to each orientation. The effect is stronger at magnetic north and can be felt more clearly. We did watch, Corey, we pulled up when Corey was hanging out with me a few days ago, footage from the Fukushima tsunami. If you've ever seen this, go look it up. What appears to be angels moving around and portaling people out as the waves are coming through. It's very weird, interesting stuff. So it's possible that that is an example. In the Law of One, they say that when Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened, that they pulled everybody out before they got hit. Because if you get hit with a nuclear explosion, it's multidimensional and it actually destroys your soul. And they can't allow that to happen, so they have to pull you out first. So I believe that when you look at Corey and when you look at what he claims has happened to him, that he's getting pulled out and he's getting brought up into this higher plane of existence, if the blue avians do it, it's a purple or blue orb that shows up, goes up to his chest and engulfs him, and they pull him out with that. If it's the people in the inner earth, he gets this white flash of light, and all of a sudden he's down inside the earth, talking to the priestess Kari or some of these other people called the Anshar that are down there. And we've talked about this throughout the weekend. I'm not going to try to recover all that data right now. The point is, both the Anshar and the blue avians have a technology. If Corey is telling the truth, and I totally believe he is, I've had plenty of personal experiences that validate it for me. If Corey is telling the truth, then both sets of beings, the blue avians and the Anshar, have a technology that can portal people out practically instantaneously. So why wouldn't they have enough personnel and enough staff and enough technology to do a whole bunch of people all at once right when it mattered at the very, very last moment? If they can do it fast enough to pull people out before the nuclear wave hits them, they can slow time down to a crawl. They can get it right down to the minutest little interval. And Corey has also said that these ETs do have a cosmic rescue plan that they enact every time these solar events take place. It's part of the cycle. So I really, again, you guys are all dedicated scholars of this, and I really appreciate you coming out here and supporting this conference and supporting my work by being here. It's totally awesome to be on the stage telling you this stuff. Thank you. I feel really blessed. Do I have any competition? Is there anybody else doing stuff like this? No. This is it. I mean, nobody else has put all this together like this. That may be why the Blue Avians are working with Corey, because Corey starts working with me, and it's a team. And I understood what they said in the Law of One more than anybody else had up until then. So you got to really dig in the Law of One, but they do tell you that this is going to happen. So if you have even a modicum of belief that this might be real, then it's really worth studying it and paying attention. Now look at this. Although the energy is weak, it is coming from the now distant but soon to be paramount direction for your planet. 20 degrees east of north. That means it's going to be a new axis. You see how dodgy the wording is? Like, you could easily gloss over that if you're tired or suffering from the kind of heat in this room. At least I got my pack now, this thing. It's making my shirt all soaking wet, but I don't care. The new paramount direction, pole shift, harvest, earth change. Now he comes right out. He can't handle the teasing anymore, right? I gotta frickin' know. I can't handle it anymore. Frickin' tell me, dude, when the planetary axis realigns, is it gonna go 20 degrees east of north to conform to this new green ray vibration? There is every indication that this will occur. Now, what did they say about Lemuria? This change, there is a confluence of energies at the end of a cycle, and this encouraged what was already an inevitable movement of the surfaces of your planet. You see this? And I had a hard time when I read the Law of One originally back in 96. Wow, they're saying there's going to be a pole shift. How does that fit in? And it took years to figure out that the people with the bad karma go through the actual disaster, but everybody else is portaled out. They don't have to